Hello and welcome to this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. What had been a 5-5 tie heading into the weekend here at the President's Cup has turned into that familiar, ominous feeling if you are an international President's Cup supporter. The score heading into Sunday singles is United States 11, internationals 7. Rex, it was about a 12-hour day here at Royal Montreal with Patrick Cantley and Xander Schauffele finishing in the dark. What was your biggest takeaway as the Americans pulled ahead and now, again, hold a 4-shot lead heading into the final day?
It's got to be 4, right? Can't be 3.
Always.
Can't be 5. Always has to be 4. It was 4 2 years ago in Charlotte, just so everyone knows. I'm not exaggerating here. If it's 3, there's a legitimate reason we would have hope. There would be a legitimate statistical reason. I could give you an argument of why I think the internationals could pull this out and win for the first time in nearly 3 decades. If it was 5, I would tell you, nope, it's over. That's never happened. Not in the Ryder Cup, not in the President's Cup. This isn't going to happen. It's got to be 4. It's always got to be 4. And the reason that I'm saying this is because just 3 times in 14 playings of this event has the international side even won the Sunday singles session. Twice, they've won it by 3 points. That's the most they've ever won it by. So 4-3 is the magic number. It's got to be 4. So you don't love the international team's chances to pull it off. However, I still think Mike Weir has a degree of confidence when it comes to this team. I do think that I was just out doing a hit for Live From, and we're right next to the team cabins, and there must have been karaoke, and they had a dinner going on. Like, it was a very light mood. So I'm not sure there's panic. I'm not sure everyone just moped back to the hotel room. But it's hard for me to tell you statistically, yes, I think this is how it would work. All that being said, statistically, we tried to make an argument earlier in the week about how this was going to play out, and it went the opposite. The international team made history. They swept the alternate shot session on Friday for the first time ever in the history of this event. So if they're going to win this, they're going to have to make history again.
Historically, you're exactly right. Like, this thing is over by any metric. The Americans are 10-0 when leading, heading into singles. But you make a great point that over the first 3 days, basically all of these statistical or historical precedents we've had in the President's Cup have blown up in our face. There's been so many firsts, whether it was the first American sweep in the opening day in 24 years, whether it was on Friday with the first sweep of foursomes for the international team, the first time we've ever seen in the President's Cup history, back-to-back sweeps by different teams on different days. We even saw some history, Rex, from Mike Weir on Saturday using the exact same lineup for the morning 4-balls and the afternoon foursomes. That move, if you're an international President's Cup supporter, backfired. If you were Mike Weir, they got beat 3-1 in the morning, the same margin in the afternoon, even if the quality of the matches was higher and it was much tighter, the result is the same. If you're U.S. captain Jim Furyk and you now hold this 4-point lead, I keep saying 4-shot lead, 4-point lead heading into the final day, what's your message to the guys? How do you sort of avoid the complacency or the sort of the inevitable feeling of, here we go again, we should be able to cruise?
My guess is he does the same thing he did Thursday night going into Friday after they'd gotten swept. And it's the Ted Lasso thing, right? It's bleed. I don't know if he's got the sign hanging in the cabin, but that's the message that he's sending to the players. You have to believe that you can get it done. And that message, that concept, worked going into Friday. They needed to believe that they could do something that they had never done before, and they were able to pull it off on Friday. That sets up for a really good narrative if you're Mike Weir, trying to set the team down, trying to get them in the right frame of mind. And I like what he did with the Sunday singles. I think tomorrow night when we sit down, and more than likely we're talking about another international loss and another American win, there's going to be some areas where you and I start picking apart some of the things that Mike Weir did. Specifically, you just mentioned probably the biggest one I'm going to point to, and the idea that you sort of rode the same horses all week long and that you seem to want to try to hide some players. Minwoo Lee is the one that immediately comes to mind. And as you pointed out, it was really close throughout the afternoon alternate shot session. At one point, it looks as if the international team was actually going to steal a point, maybe even 2 points going into Sunday. And that would make it a 1-point game going into Sunday. Just imagine the conversation we'd be having right now. And the international side just didn't get it done coming down the stretch. 16, 17, and 18 all went the Americans' way. I just kind of added up the stats for the week. 31 matches have made it to the 18th hole, almost exclusively today, since the first 2 days were pretty much blowouts. 7 of those matches went the American side on 16, 17, and 18, that closing stretch. Just 3 went the international side You can do the math for me. That's 4 points, essentially. That's the difference in this. You could make an argument that his team just ran out of steam. Hideki Matsuyama looked exhausted, gasped. Even Tom Kim, who probably just expended so much energy and so much emotion over the course of the week, he looked gassed coming down the stretch.
Well, before we dive into Mike Weir's decision-making, and I certainly thought it was curious, like, why do you put Minwoo Lee on this team as a captain's pick if you're only going to use him once? I understand that he lost on Thursday. I understand that his iron play was not good, but he was still not the worst player on the internet. If you're the internationals, he was not the worst player on Thursday. That was actually Sung Jae Im and Christian Bezuidenhout. Instead, he sits 3 consecutive sessions, and you have to wonder where his confidence is, where his belief level is on heading into Sunday singles, having not played since Thursday afternoon. He only lost that match alongside Adam Scott, 1-up in Thursday 4-balls. It's not like they got ran off the golf course. He also sat Jason Day, Ben On, Christian Bezuidenhout for all of those matches. You do not see any of those players up high in his Sunday lineup. Do you think that Mike Weir's strategy backfired because now he may have even undermined some of his players' confidence not getting on the golf course on Saturday?
I do. However, I think this applies to, and I think we had this conversation earlier in the week, that if you were going to really try to level the playing field here, at least in the favor of the internationals, if we really want to get to parity, which you and I can agree to, I'm not quite sure the PGA Tour is under the same mindset. The easiest, most expedited way to get there is to drop the number of available points to 28. That's what they have at the Ryder Cup. And the reason they want that, Ernie Els was a big proponent of that. So was Nick Price when they were captains, was it allows you to hide some players, just like Mike Weir tried to do this week. Yes, I think it backfired a little bit, especially this afternoon, when you look at how his top players, the ones who had produced for him largely over the course of the week, just didn't get it done.
And look, this afternoon was very, very close. There was even a time, I think with about I would say about an hour left in the afternoon foursomes. You were looking at a potential sweep for the internationals. However, you look at how that last 45 minutes played. You mentioned the performance specifically on 16, 17, and 18. Was that fatigue that is setting in with the Americans who are a little bit fresher, the internationals who had sort of got whipped in the morning, sent back out? I think it's certainly a topic for discussion. He's leaning heavily into the Canadians as well. Taylor Pendrith is going to be going all 5 sessions. Corey Connor is going to be going all 5 sessions. Mackenzie Hughes, despite not playing his best at times during this President's Cup, is going 4 sessions. You mentioned the quality of play sort of tailing off for Hideki Matsuyama and Sung Jae Im as well. I just wonder now, as you look ahead to Sunday singles, what do these guys have left? It's going to take a near flawless performance from this international team to push this. Again, this is the same margin they had in 2022 at Quail Hollow. It's certainly a different dynamic, though, isn't it, Rex? Like, you and I both covered that tournament 2 years ago. That was Tom Kim and Siwoo Kim together again. The histrionics, the theatrics, the antics. It was Tom Kim who made that putt on the 18th hole on Saturday afternoon to at least give the internationals a glimmer of hope to get it within, again, that magical 4-point margin. This one, though, feels a little bit differently. The belief may be higher. The quality of this team may be better. It may be deeper. It's still 4 points. And I think the way that it ended Saturday night with what could have been a 2, 3, or 4-point margin was the worst case scenario for what actually happened for the internationals.
And I think we see that time and time again, both in this event and at the Ryder Cup, where Saturday night in the dusk, it seems like the sun is always setting when something crucial happens that carries over into Sunday and ultimately decides who wins. I am going to just point out real quick that I think the U.S. side had 4 players that are going to end up going all 5 matches. So it's not as though the American side was resting everyone. Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, and
Patrick Cantlay.
Thank you, Patrick Cantlay. All are going to go 5 sessions. Those are the 4 American horses. You would expect that. My guess is Jim Furyk had that written down in pen, not pencil, when he came up with the plan for this week. So it's not as though the American team had a drastically different strategy. It's just they didn't sit someone after playing just once on Thursday for the rest of the week and then expect them to come out on Sunday and perform. That's clearly not a recipe for success.
Yes, Sahith Theegala for the Americans did not play at all on Saturday. He was the only player on the U.S. side who did not do that. He did play both on Thursday and Friday. I thought Jim Furyk also made a good point, Rex, in sort of managing the fatigue of this American roster with the 4-day schedule for the President's Cup as opposed to the condensed nature of the Ryder Cup with 36, and then singles, it's not as big of a factor. Yes, this was a very long day, a 12-hour day at Royal Montreal, but this is essentially the last tournament that these guys are going to be playing in for the remainder of the year. I think they're more than happy to expend the energy if it helps lead their teams to victory. Let's talk about some of the players who stood out, either performance-wise, personality-wise. What were some of the headlines for you on this Saturday?
Well, I'm going to immediately go to the American side. And look, Scottie Scheffler is the heart and soul of this team. And he's the first one you have to point out. He was going to be a horse, and he delivered this time. And you say that, like, of course he would. He's the world number one. He's done incredible things this season. He hasn't particularly played well in these matches, either the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup. So this is a bit of a breakthrough for him as far as the performance, as far as leading on the golf course. I think Xander Schauffele, and we talked about this earlier in the week, he has become the leader of this team, and he played like it today. That was a very close match that could have swung it either way. Jim Furyk brought up a really good point that as Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele are finishing up their match against the Kims, as they're coming up 18, Jim's trying to figure out Sunday lineups, thinking we could have a 2-stroke lead, a 3-stroke lead, or a 4-stroke lead. That's how that was the margin at this point. So you're right. It was exceedingly close. I love what Xander has done this week. Collin Morikawa has probably been the best performer, though, I would ask. I don't know if the statistics hold up to that, but I have seen him hit shot after shot after shot under pressure when he has to hit it. And you have to be impressed with the way he's played.
And like heading into this Saturday afternoon foursome session, I was wondering if this could be potentially the end of Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele. They were so good to start their respective team competition careers, 6-2-1 in President's Cups, in Ryder Cups. They were in danger, Rex, of going 0 for their last 5 and actually having a sub 500 record if they did not win that match against Tom Kim and Siwoo Kim. Instead, it was Patrick Cantlay delivering the theatrics, as he seemingly always does, as he seemingly did last year in Rome, with so much hostility and animosity directed at him, making that putt in the darkness that at least gave the Americans a chance to stage a Sunday rally. Xander Schauffele just continues to impress. I mean, he's such a well-rounded mega talent. It's just been so fun to see him elevate in new ways in 2024. As predicted in the preview podcast, Russell Henley has been a revelation this week, picking up Scottie Scheffler at times in what was a early deficit in their foursomes match that turned into a pretty convincing 3-2 victory to get a crucial point for the Americans, as well. Sam Burns, who had sort of been saddled with Scottie Scheffler over these past 2 team competitions, has seemingly found his way. The only player who does not have a loss on his record on the U.S. roster so far. But I think, obviously, Rex, the biggest headline of this Saturday was Tom Kim and Siwoo Kim. The theatrics, the animated nature, the fist pumps, the chest bumps, the screaming. Tom Kim even went so far, Rex, to say in his post-round press conference that he thought there was not very good sportsmanship on the part of Team USA, that some players were, quote, looking at him and cursing at him. Anything that you saw over the final hour that gave you pause, that said this got a little bit out of hand?
I don't know if it got out of hand. Todd Lewis and I just did kind of an extended hit on Live From about this. Todd had a chance to talk with Tom Kim to make sure that he was clear on this. Was this someone yelling at you from outside the ropes or someone that was yelling inside the ropes? And he said it was inside the ropes. He didn't want to give any names. And it actually occurred. You and I both were standing on the back of the 11th green. And if you remember, there was a bit of a flip. It looked as if the international team was in trouble off the tee. It looked as if the American team was going to get a point out of that hole. As they always did, they made the putt, they fist bumps, they bumped chest, they celebrated just like they have all week long. And then Patrick Cantlay does what Patrick Cantlay does, and he made a very, very long par putt on top of him to keep the match all square at that point. I think what happened, what Tom Kim is referring to, happened as he was walking off the green. And it was not, to be clear, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay, or their caddies. This was part of the entourage that was following along with the match. And you could see that it was heated. It was animated. There was a lot of yelling going on. And someone yelled in Tom's direction. I was standing just off to the side, to the point that it caused Tom to sort of recoil and look back as if trying to figure out, well, what just happened? And I think that's where – and there might have been other instances. That's just the one I saw. I guess the question here is, has it gone too far? And I did talk with a caddy from the international side this afternoon, just briefly, about this. And he said, yes, there's chippiness on both sides. And it is clear the U.S. team, not big fans of Tom Kim's histrionics. And I think that's just going to grow over time as this event and as he evolves as a player. However, this caddy was quick to point out that what happened today couldn't touch what happened Saturday last year at the Ryder Cup. Last year on Saturday at the Ryder Cup, we almost had a fight in the parking lot. And we had the fans yelling and waving their hats and a caddy and a player going toe-to-toe with each other. And that's kind of the norm at the Ryder Cup. And what happened today was uncomfortable. It may have crossed the line. I'm not even quite sure about that, but it wasn't terrible.
No, it wasn't terrible. It made Tom Kim seem a little bit thin-skinned, a little bit soft. It was like that meme where it's like, I'm not mad. Don't write that I'm mad. But even though he's definitely most certainly mad about what actually happened, like this is tame stuff for what you'd see in the Ryder Cup. I think the biggest issue here, Rex, is that Tom Kim and Siwoo Kim, I think probably to a little bit of a lesser extent. Now he did do the night celebration on 16, which again does not make any sense. The night celebration that was made famous by NBA superstar Steph Curry is essentially to signal that the competition is over. Like you swish a long three, night. We're certainly done with you. That did not make any sense. They went from one down to tie with 2 holes to play. I did not understand it. I enjoyed the celebration. Again, it didn't make any sense. But I do think what the issue is here is that the Kims were demonstrative, and that stands, of course, in stark contrast to the typically stoic demeanor of both Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay. And the Kims, in particular, stand in stark contrast to the rest of the team. I mean, this is a mostly tame bunch that is, I think, has a really difficult task of bridging different cultures, different languages, different personalities. Like, yes, the internationals need this sort of fire, this sort of passion that oozes from these 2 players, but it's really hard to engender that same sort of emotion and intensity in a Christian Bezadenhout or a Jason Day or a Taylor Pendrith. Like, those players just aren't built like that. Yes, would it be great if all 12 players were built like that? And that's the sort of intensity that we saw in the President's Cup. Would that help the international team's fortunes? Yeah, probably. It'd probably grate on our nerves a little bit, but I think that could only probably help. But you can't force these players to be something that they're not. I think when it comes to Tom Kim, and the reason why it gets under the players' skins on the American side is that he's so demonstrative. And as we saw on Thursday, he even directs it at some of the players in terms of Scottie Scheffler woofing at him, flexing at him. In both times, it has backfired. Just like at Quail Hollow, where he was the emotional leader for the internationals, he still went 2-3 that week. Tom Kim, the emotional leader once again for the internationals, he is now sporting a 1-2 record. What again is a 4-point deficit for the international team.
I think, look, this event, the Ryder Cup, they're better when there's an antagonist. We've learned that from Ian Poulter. We learned it from Patrick Reed. We've learned it over the history of certainly the Ryder Cup. So I'm all for. I'm here for Tom Kim and all of his histrionics, even though sometimes they can get a little grating. I think where this is sort of in dangerous territory when it comes specifically to Tom Kim is you do have to back it up. And as Nota Begay was really quick to point out earlier in the week, and this stat still holds true, he has a losing record in this event. And he's a very talented player. And I love the idea of them having their version of Ian Poulter or Patrick Reed. Like, the Americans need sort of that antagonist to come at him, but he also has to back it up with his play.
And keep in mind that the President's Cup has a different format than the Ryder Cup, where you can select the player, the opponent that you would want to see face down. I don't think there would have been any shortage of American players who would want a piece of Tom Kim on Sunday singles. The task is eventually going to fall to Sam Burns in the second one off. Let's go ahead and look, Rex, at this Sunday singles lineup. It was pretty clear what Jim Furyk wanted to do, perhaps taking a lesson from the 2012 Ryder Cup when they did not front load the lineup. This is basically a murderer's row when you look at who Jim Furyk is sending out. Xander Schauffele, the second best player in the world. Sam Burns, again, the only undefeated member of the U.S. team this week. Scottie Scheffler, the world number 1, 8-time winner this season, coming off a big Saturday as well. Russell Henley, one of the best iron players, has clearly proven his worth in match play. And then Patrick Cantlay, Keegan Bradley. I mean, you could conceivably have the President's Cup over by that point. The U.S. just needs 4.5 points to win this one, with those 6 players in particular, like they're coming for blood.
Well, and if you just do the math, so the United States needs 4.5 points to clinch the cup, and you just start putting things together. And Jason Day has played well this week, but I'm not quite sure how I can talk myself.
He just sat all day Saturday.
Yeah, and he'll be plenty rested. I can't talk myself into thinking he would beat Scotty Scheffler. Sam Burns, same thing. I mean, I think that's going to be an entertaining match. It could that one can probably go either way. I just think you go down the list and you can see it finishing off somewhere around that Tagala line, that Wyndham Clark line, maybe even Tony Finau as early as that. I do think it's interesting that all the way back at 10, he put Morikawa, who we just pointed out. He has probably been statistically the U.S. side's best player. So even though, yes, Jim Furyk has clearly learned from his mistakes from what he did in 2018 at the Ryder Cup, and he's also learned how to front end a lineup. There's also the safety valve, which I like the idea of having Colin Morikawa on the back end.
I thought that was a brilliant move by Jim Furyk. He probably will not have to factor in the proceedings, but if things get weird, and keep in mind things did get weird at Quail Hollow, there was about a 45 to 60-minute window in Charlotte where there certainly is a pathway for victory for the internationals. Things got pretty quiet at the middle of that afternoon. If things go that same direction tomorrow at Royal Montreal, who better than having one of the most accurate players on the PGA Tour holding on the 10 spot if it does get into that position. Prediction time, Rex. It's 11-7 right now. When we do the recap pod on Sunday night, what will be the final score of this 2024 President's Cup?
Oh, I think it'll be somewhere in the 16 range. I think the United States gets to 16 and a half. I don't think it's a blowout. As I just pointed out, the kind of the stats when it comes to Sunday singles, they seem to tie more often than not. I think in the 14 matches, they've tied 7 times. So it's not as though one side seems to blow out the other side. These Sunday singles matches all seem to play pretty even, because suddenly I think every player, 12 players on both sides, get into the rhythm of, okay, this is what I do for a living week in and week out. I no longer have a teammate. So I don't think it's going to be a crazy blowout on the American sides, but it's clear they have a pretty easy pathway to victory.
I would agree with you. I do think it'll be over quickly. And then once that becomes clear, it's hard to predict how those late matches are going to pan out when everyone's sort of already looking ahead to the celebration for the sake of posterity. I will guess 17.5 to 12.5, a 5-point margin of victory for the Americans. I think there's been sort of a statistical anomaly this week, Rex. Not a single tied match. Full points galore. So I do think we will have a situation where, again, the American players may shrug. They're basically only competing for their individual record and what will show up on Wikipedia 10 years from now. We'll have plenty more up on NBCSports.com/golf. Rex on the closing stretch, myself on the chippiness of the day here at Royal Montreal. We'll be back with you for a full recap of the 2024 President's Cup on the podcast on Sunday night. Pour one out for my dogs who, if I seemed a little bit distracted during this podcast record, is because I'm watching them lose 30-7 in what is the first half in Tuscaloosa. Thank God I did not plan my entire evening around this godforsaken game. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. Talk to you guys on Sunday